concerning.
Started with the Fire and Emergency Management Committee meeting Thursday, July 2nd at 2:30 p.m. First agenda item is a fire station tour.
I think we'll go ahead and pause the recording, and we do have someone participating via Zoom, but it's not going to be possible to Zoom the tour, but we'll be back in this room when the tour concludes.
Yeah, Dennis Ravel is with.
Any comments or questions from anyone regarding the station? Next agenda item is the fire station expansion plans and permit status.
So currently where we're at with the station expansion is we're waiting, and I've looked at several updates now, update emails, I should say, to clarify between our architect and county planning and building. We are dealing with a plan checker at the county that is very detailed and creating some issues for us. So I've tried to work with Supervisor Sean's office to get some of those items taken care of. There have been two challenges that are the only outstanding things right now is the call for essential facilities, that if we touch anything in the current area that you just saw, we have to upgrade everything to essential facilities, which our architect is telling us there's nothing in the code that says that we have to do that. The only thing that has to be essential facilities is the apparatus bay. And then when we add the new, or if we were to expand, then that would have to be incorporated into essential facilities. The way we're building it would be a separate complete building that's not attached structurally, but physically attached to the apparatus bay. And therefore, everyone and all the architects I talked to at the station design conference basically said that's the way to do it, to avoid the essential facility requirements. And so now we're in this situation where the current plan checker is telling us, well, no, that doesn't matter. You got to do it anyways.
What is an essential facility requirement?
So essential facilities basically says that it'll operate during an emergency, like a large earthquake. It's to a higher level of standard. You have backup power, a variety of different things that are comprised, but mainly it's seismic and backup power are the main things.
Yeah, the idea is sound, right? So you don't want an earthquake to crumble the fire equipment in an apparatus space, then no one can respond to the emergency. So it's built to a higher standard, and these go back decades. So when this work was done, even in the 90s, essential facility standards existed. It's just over time the code changes.
Okay.
And then the other issue, did you mention the other issue of the power? The other sort of
So
dispute
on that one, essentially what's happening with the power is we have a current dispute where Toma Electric, they're the electrical engineers. I fairly certainly know what they're talking about. Have submitted a plan that brings a single feed into the building. It's a new one that would take the 200 amp for the admin side and the 200 amp for the fire side out. It drops a new 600 amp panel, and then it creates not panel, feed, which then splits into two feeder panels, a 400 amp for the fire station and a 200 amp for the admin side. The current plan checker is saying we can't do that. You can't split a feed. Well, actually, Toma Electric, the engineer, sent me the code section that says, no, you can do it right here if it's under single management. Well, of course we're under single management. We're a community service district. So those are the two disputes that we're dealing with, is essential facility and that electrical issue.
It's just really slow to, you know, as we've seen the sort of the back and forth with the county can take quite a while to get even a limited number of issues resolved.
Yeah.
So
I have reached out to Supervisor Pashong, like I said, and Lori Gallegos, his aide, is gonna put me in contact with Jill Comer, the second in charge, underneath Trevor Keith. With the county planning and building, he's the community development director. And he's in charge of, you know, county planning, building, all of that, code enforcement, et cetera. And she's gonna put me in contact with Jill Comer, and Jill's second in command, to find out how we streamline this and get these problems resolved. But it's just been really too long.
Have you talked to Kate Valentine?
not about this.
Maybe she's previously said if you have any issues, like in planning and.
I'm not sure who she is.
She's with Public Works.
Yeah,
Well, no,
yeah, no, she's an assistant county CEO now.
Oh, is she?
She's over Public Works.
She's with Public Works on, there just a year and a half ago, so
Yeah, I
she's
know.
moved up.
Yeah.
They've got a bunch of new assistants.
She covers a lot of areas now, and planning is one of them.
Yeah.
Previously, she said contact her.
Oh. Fantastic. Yeah.
Just, you know, I think, we're just waiting to get some resolution. We did want to just remind you of since you just toured the station, again, these plans, you know, were started a couple years ago, this concept of this expansion and what it included, and so, you know, this is the existing apparatus bay here, and the expansion would add a single story attack with, a separate foundation building that would be essentially abutting the back of the apparatus bay. That would include this kitchen here, a day room, a workout room,
And
storage, workshop,
decon.
decon, and then this is the clean
The
room,
locker,
where this room you could walk through from the apparatus bay into the new facility. And then the downstairs changes in the offices, the current captain's bedroom would be converted into a bathroom. That's really the only significant change, again, knowing that restroom count is a real struggle right now. And then upstairs, this first half would be gutted, and then, you know, sort of new bedrooms would be added and another bathroom would be added. So this station expansion / remodel would result in, you know, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and then, you know, a new facility here. And the goal when we started these plans a couple of years ago was to design around about a $2 million budget, $2 to $2.5 million total. And then we designed it, of course, started the permitting, and then the most recent cost estimate we got from the architect was about $4.9 million, which was very shocking since we were designing around this constrained budget.
So with that in mind, I have reached out, and on that same vein, the current construction that's taking place for City of Atascadero, they're building they're remodeling one station and building an entirely new station. And then the City of Morro Bay is doing the same thing. So I've reached out to both of those chiefs and asked what their cost per square foot is. And both of them have come back and said it's around between 900 and 1,200 in that range. At the current cost estimate that we have been receiving back, that would put our per square foot cost at about 2,800 a square foot. So it's an unrealistic number. And this is what I've been saying all along, is this is a ridiculous, unrealistic number. That's my main drive to ask the committee and so to support and ask the board to continue this process, to go out to bid, to find out what the real number is. If the City of Atascadero can build that station for 1,200 a square foot, and the City of Morro Bay can build a new station 2 for 900 a square foot, then something's wrong with the numbers that we're getting back estimate wise. And again, cost estimates done from both of those agencies locally. Now, we have gotten our cost estimates out of Irvine. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know. But I know those per square foot numbers are way out of alignment with what reality is. So just a side note on that.
Questions or comments?
Okay.
Third agenda item is the interim expansion requirements.
Yeah, so on that one, I put together a brief staff report that kind of covers what what I just talked about initially, but we've kind of gone over the background. We've invested $150,000 into the current set of plans, plan reviews, etc. I would propose that we see that through and get those plans permitted, go out to bid, see what those numbers are. The general manager and I have even reached out and confirmed that there's no issue with going out to bid on this. And if it comes back and we go, nope, not gonna work, then we just shelf it and we have to wait until we have the funds to do it in the future. But at least it gives us the ammunition to be able to go, oh, that's the real number. Yes, and it's at 900, 1,000, 1,100, whatever per square foot instead of 2,800 square foot. And so with that, we've talked about the financial consideration on page 2, and then again, my recommendation is completing those final stages, and basically, if we're at that point and we go out to bid on this and it comes back, and let's say it's 1.5, and again, we don't have the ability to do the asset replacement on that right now, then the board can make the determination at that point to say, look, we just don't have it right now, and look at a modernization or upgrade to the current facility right now. With that, I've added the proposed station modernization project and what I think the actual budget would be on that. And with that said, I've actually put some of this into the current AFG grant, which has been submitted, which is a exhaust capture system, a source capture system for the diesel exhaust. That's about $60,000 of the project. And then the other thing that was available in that AFG grant was PPE extractors, washer dryer. And that's roughly about $15,000. So I put in for both of those. Again, the source capture system for the diesel exhaust, I'm not super confident on that one, just by the way the grant was structured and how they identified their high priorities. And without getting into too much detail, we're not saying this is one of their top priorities. Go ahead.
Yeah, so on those, for the money, which account are we confident that we'll be able to use the money from the capital replacement or?
No, I'm not confident. We would need to do some further analysis on that.
So this
Because
money-
we wouldn't be expanding the station, although you're we're doing some remodeling to allow for 24-hour operations with 2 persons. I mean, that station upgrade would essentially add a bathroom and kind of reconfigure some other space to allow for, at least 2 persons to be here 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So we would need to do some further evaluation to determine the appropriate funding source. Its impact on the operations fund is kind of independent of that funding source. In other words, if you book those assets, regardless of how it's paid for, grants, asset replacement
Yeah.
or capital, it has the same effect on the operating fund in terms of its future asset replacement contribution.
But would it come out initially from the operating fund too? Or
It
the
would probably come out
reserve?
of asset replacement or capital, and then grants.
Okay, so, because I thought, okay, for asset, okay, for capital, okay, I see. For asset replacement, okay,
If we determined that we couldn't use
for
the
the
capital
expansion.
account for all of the
Then
expenses, then
asset
we can use asset replacement.
And we
Those are,
have-
those are,
then we have a. Okay, alright, that's what.
I mean, none of the accounts have an abundance of funds, but we have enough cash in the asset replacement fund to cover what's proposed.
Yeah,
here.
and I.
At something like 200 to 250 grand.
Which, yeah, I agree with that, and that's something that we had talked about, so I think we should do those. I guess my question is that I know you're going out to bid and you're gonna get the numbers and everything like that.
Well, I wanna just press pause just for a second. That's what the chief's proposed. That is not authorized in the budget. There would be more costs incurred to go out to bid, right? We'd have to, one, we don't have a permittable project yet.
Yeah.
So we need to resolve that. Then, once that's permittable, we'll have to engage the architect to create the bid packet. All the specifications, there'll be some costs. We'll need to figure out what those are and then get authorization from the board.
But,
Cause there's, going out to bid isn't free.
yeah, no, but I thought the board, we discussed this and we came up with the $250,000.
That's
No,
a
that's separate. He's talking about a separate item.
Well, I thought we said that we don't wanna do the fire department expansion, I thought we were.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your, when you said go out to bid, I thought you were speaking about the expansion project of the plans I just showed you.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I thought we said we can't afford it, basically, and then we agreed to the $250,000, wasn't that?
Yes, that's kind of why that item's here. If you'll have several decision trees, none of which are before you today, because we don't have a permittable project. But if you opt not to continue to work on the major expansion, and stop now or at any point going forward, then we would have to engage an architect. We don't have plans to, can we grab the agenda off of this? We're having technical challenges.
Because I thought we had agreed as the board to go ahead and finish up the planning part and get it to permit. And then, I thought we agreed to that, and then the bidding, we thought, okay, we could go out to bid, but I just thought we had said that that would just be for our own purpose knowledge at this point. Okay, but at this point, we're just.
But we still are gonna need to spend more money to get there, right? So we're gonna have to, if we can get the plans to a permittable point, then we'll have to turn those permittable plans into a bid package with the support of the architect. That will need to engage the architect to.
And how much is that?
I don't have an answer on that.
Typical.
I mean, quite honestly, the issues that the county's pointing out, if we can't get resolution on, they're gonna be expensive to resolve. Or the county will come around and we'll be able to, work with what we have.
Alright,
Yeah, that's gonna actually,
I mean,
that could
we need-
alter some issues with regards to potentially the affordability of the project. If they somehow sign outside of the actual code and say, we have to update this entire area over here to essential facility earthquake and everything else, then.
So it will affect these numbers as well, right, for these remodel, it would affect.
Well, it could, but the problem is I've dealt with and know a lot of code experts. Building, fire, etc. I've reached out to many of them. And all of them are saying, no, that's an incorrect interpretation.
Like,
So essentially, if we don't touch structurally anything in that office area or the upstairs, and we're not doing anything structurally, then it doesn't trigger anything essential facilities wise. And we can maintain the status we're at. He is making a different determination than that.
And the thing is, we have to resolve this through whatever steps are gonna be necessary, right? So right now, it's still in the hands of the plans examiner with some outside influence and all, he's not issued a final determination. Once that's made, then we can go through sort of an appeals process through higher channels of the county. But all of this is pretty time consuming, right? With the very slow to communicate back and forth.
And then we can't do any of the work that we need to, like, I really like to see this exhaust evacuation system in place.
Well, I think that you could put in,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, things that we could do without,
It would need a permit.
Yeah, it would need a permit, but but if that was an independent project, I don't think the other issues would necessarily creep into it.
I mean, the whole thing is, if he's questioning the essential facility capability of the apparatus bay, it could. So I don't know. And that determination is kind of what we're waiting
because
for.
I mean, it sounds like it's gonna be months away. Because if we have to go through appeal process and things like that with the county.
I don't know. This is why we're waiting for his determination to see whether we're gonna have to fight it or whether he's just
Yeah.
gonna go, okay,
Yeah.
you're right.
But, so the expansion plans are still pending, there's, pending. This interim, you know, maybe, I think I called it interim, expansion requirements. This is the report that Chief Peterson.
Yeah, this is not necessarily an expansion.
I'm having a really difficult time operating any technology in here and I had zero luck on Friday, so I'm just gonna kind of give up. But, they wanted to make sure the chief sort of described where those would be when you went through the tour, but, you know, kind of right there. Perfect. So the downstairs area is shown in that sort of floor plan. And the upstairs area would eliminate that, I'll call it first room. And then none of the exterior walls would be changing or anything.
Right. We would be bumping out, so for example, the current chief's office where it says captain office bedroom right there. We would be changing out the slider into a door, a regular door and a window. That's essentially the only change to that office. And then we'd obviously probably take one of the mini splits from upstairs and move it into that office. The captain's bedroom right now, we would turn into a conference room. Quite honestly, it'd probably be an empty room for the moment. And then that could potentially be where we would put reserve firefighters if we ever got them back. The front office would become the chief's office. We'd expand that out a little bit. Make it a little bit bigger, shrink the desk in here, and then expand out the bathroom, the downstairs bathroom into a full shower. That's kind of it there. And then the upstairs, we would put in the new windows. That would be consistent with the current proposed expansion plan. But we would just go ahead and do that and use that as a partial permit acceptance to go, hey, this has been approved. We're just gonna put these windows in. And then do a kitchen expansion where we kind of have an L-shaped island with a dining table, and redo all the cabinets and appliances, in the kitchen. And then the current bedroom, where the engineers would be, we would just take one of those mini splits and slide it into that one. Because that area would be where the pole, in the expansion portion. And I wanna split that and make the distinction clear. Expansion is what we've submitted to the county. Remodel or upgrade is what's being proposed here. So just as long as we're straight on that.
But we need, in order to be able to do any of the remodel, we need to get the plans through. We
Yes.
can't do
Well,
anything,
Well, so right now,
I mean,
once those plans are approved, we'll at least know the baseline requirements for
yeah,
pausing and going through this. Right now, both those issues
alright.
might affect our ability to move forward with even
Yes.
these plans. And all of this stuff would require a permit. We don't have an exemption from a county permit for work at the fire station. So even if we got direction to proceed with right now, we'd have to hire an architect or pivot with our current architect to design plans that can be permitted to deal with these changes. I think it makes sense to get a resolution on the matters in the
Yeah.
county now, before we start that, before we begin that effort, so we're not doing things twice.
I mean, I just thought, at least for the exhaust system, evacuation, that's be a separate issue that could move forward on its own. But I guess it may be so.
I think, and I'm not saying it could not. Let's say for example, we got the grant funding for that project. And we weren't ready to move forward with other things, it's possible we could do that project, that portion independently. We had an exhaust system in
Yeah,
in that
exactly,
building.
yeah.
It just wasn't this tracked system,
And
it extracted exhaust from the cavity of the apparatus bay, not directly from the engine.
And when would we find out from the grant? We'll hear from
Probably
the-
September or October is a new time periods for the AFG grant.
Okay.
And by the way, that exhaust system is also part of the expansion
Yes.
project.
I know.
Chief, not to take a lot of time up on this, but how do these renderings align with your expansion concepts or plans? Are they taken directly from, or they're all together? What are some big bullet point differences between this and the expansion?
So the big bullet point difference is obviously the kitchen, it remains upstairs. We don't have 3 dormitory style bedrooms upstairs. We're kind of spread out amongst the station bedroom wise. What else?
There's no second bathroom upstairs.
There's no second bathroom upstairs, and the downstairs bathroom moves across to the other bedroom area. So that's the biggest differences. Yeah, and then obviously the expansion of the new area out the back of the apparatus bay, and all that additional square footage where we would have a normal kitchen and a day room and gym inside instead of doing a tough shed outside. That type of thing.
So this next page kind of, right there,
Yep. And
sort of
that kind
shows like,
that kind of describes what we're proposing. Just the clean room, 16 by 17 area that would cordon off that corner of the apparatus bay to put all the lockers, the extractor and dryer in, kind of have the sink in there to do any decon with medical calls that we have to clean off, any bloodborne pathogens, anything of that nature. Or allow guys to decontaminate from, something messy that they went on and get their boots cleaned off, whatever necessary before they enter the living space. This is a big priority with AFG. It's through the Cancer Prevention and Wellness Program to cordon off this type of thing. It's also a real hit with regards to insurance and those types of things on work comp claims, et cetera, in the future. That if you remove all of that stuff, you're now in compliance with the Cancer Prevention and Wellness Program by getting that stuff out of the apparatus bay, adding the ventilation system and separating your turnouts and whatnot. We're going to a semi-clean cap concept with the new engine. And so adding all of this other stuff is just important for cancer prevention.
So Is there enough change, I'm going back to Justin's question, is there enough change in this new I guess interim expansion requirement that will require new permitting, a new plan?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
We have zero exceptions. Anything you need a permit for at home,
So why
Need a
not
permit for
just do this at the same time? Like,
well, it's a
get it
different,
started,
well, I
we
mean,
have to do it.
the issue is it's not, it's not aligned fully with our existing application. So if it were, we could split it and do part of the work
Yeah,
with the existing plans, but
We
these
could
plans are
phase it,
different.
But it's different.
It's,
so I know, so it's different, so why are we not doing
Well-
a plan for this and sending it?
Well, because we haven't gotten a determination on essential facility yet.
yeah, it's possible that basically what I'm kind of hearing is like, is it possible the county could say you can't do anything to the building without bringing it up to essential facility standards? If that's the case, that's a real big shift in how we treat this building. We've had permits as recently as about 12 years ago in this office space that did not require essential facility upgrades. I mean, that front wall, that front office was built and we moved the office that's between, that's and behind here, we moved that wall actually during Keith Axon's time here. Squeezed him out, as it turns out. With a permit. And we weren't, that didn't trigger any sort of essential building changes. So I don't know why what's being proposed now is not having, is having a dissimilar effect. So we really do need an answer on that. Otherwise, I think you'll get to a point where you say, look, if the board would have to authorize expenses associated with developing these, a new set of plans, and at that point,
Exactly.
it probably doesn't make sense to spend more. If there's still some consideration on the board's part to proceed with the overall plans, then it doesn't make sense to spend money on in the interim plans if there's still even a fraction of a chance that we would move forward with bidding that work.
I mean, this is where I would agree with general manager. We really need a determination on this permit. To determine and get the answers we need to then move forward with this. And if we come back to the board in the end of July, and let's say we hear something in the next couple of weeks, and we say, yep, we've gotten a determination that we don't have to do all this stuff, and we're ready to go out to bid. We go out to bid. That'll be a 30-day or more process. That the architect would have to put together. And it comes back in 30 days and it's 2 million. Well, we're still out of the ballpark with regards to asset replacement. So the board would have to make a determination at that point to say no. And then in the interim, we would have the information with regards to the essential facility and the electrical. And maybe it's a portion that we do because we are struggling with the electrical, that the board makes a determination, okay, let's just upgrade the electrical as future needs arise. It'll be ready for it. At that point, we can do that and incorporate that into something like this upgrade also. I don't know what that looks like, but and then we go out, and I would recommend we go out locally to a local architect that could just draw something up very simple for us. That would somebody who could use the existing plans and say, okay, I've got everything I need. We can do a quick interior wall design for all of these changes, submit that. Hopefully it's quick through the county, and within a couple of months, we get that information back and we can start to work on that or go through the bid process on that. But nothing and I'll repeat, nothing is going through the county fast.
That's the problem.
Yeah, I think we met with the county, we did a pre-submittal review with the county about a year ago, and the plans were submitted in August, so that's 10 months so far. It's actually a pretty simple project. There's no grading, there's no site work to speak of. You know, so.
Any other questions on that station expansion? Well, I guess, so,
We really can't make any decisions on the interim expansion without.
No.
going with the plan. So, I mean,
Well, no, but I think we can get feedback on, does the interim expansion conceptually make sense? Or are there, you know, does this address the most pressing of the needs? Met your expectations from a conceptual standpoint, because once we do have some confirmation, then that can help us dictate how we move forward. If there's something that you think that's omitted or should be included in here that we haven't, now's the time. I think now is still the time to incorporate it.
I guess it seems to me that really need to determine what's gonna happen with the permit. Once the permit, you get that work through, and if it doesn't have to meet all these essential services, you're able to get the electrical panel. It seems like you'd want to get that bid first and then go back to the full board to make a decision. If the full board says, yeah, we want to move forward and do the whole thing before, or we're gonna pause on it because it's cost prohibitive, and now we want to look at the expansion.
right.
So I mean, I think it's,
The upgrade.
I guess my feeling is it 270,000 seems reasonable. But then again, I don't know what the threshold for the board's, what their desire is ultimately. It's $2,800 a square foot to 1,000. That's a really big difference.
Huge.
So that would be my thought, is to table it and not take any action.
I mean, as far as the expansion, and I'm comfortable with the, what we recommend, what you have recommended and the price, so. Yeah, if we, hopefully, once we hear from the county, then we could make it, make a decision on it.
Any questions, comment by the public?
So there's currently money set aside for this expansion, is that correct?
So there's nothing in the budget for either of these projects for fiscal year 26-27 yet. There's money set aside in the capital fund that could fund about, we should have close to $3 million by the time we get our engine reimbursed from the federal government. That could be used for an expansion. The challenge that we face is there's two challenges there when we talk about the expansion, the more formal plans. One is it was designed to about a $2 to $2.5 million budget, but it cost estimates nearly $5 million. Not a lot of confidence in any of those figures, I suppose. That's one challenge because we don't have $5 million. Probably the more significant challenge, even if it was a $2.5 million project, we have the cash to pay for it, is our policies require that when you book an asset, you begin saving money to replace that asset or upgrade that asset immediately. It's kind of like when you buy a car, you start setting aside money to replace it down the road. And if it's $2.5 million and it's amortized over 50 years, it's something like $50,000 a year we have to start setting aside. And the fire operating budget doesn't have, we're expected to be in a minor deficit once the new engine gets booked. To the tune of, maybe $30,000, $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Yeah, that $50,000 new hit, probably something like $80,000 or $90,000 or $100,000 deficit. And that's probably our more short-term challenge.
Item 4, Independence Day fireworks education and enforcement.
Yeah, so this is just an update with regards to what we've done and what we're doing, Independence Day. So number one, we've done a, kind of a media blitz with regards to the information, getting the new ordinance information out to the public. The signs have been up for a while now. We've done news spots on KSBY, and then it's hit every social media platform that I think that it can possibly hit. We have, done an announcement last night at the concerts and, essentially developed a citation, template on our iPads that we will just gather information, the night of the 3rd and the 4th. Once that information's gathered through driver's license or whatever, we'll bring that information back and, then we will be sending actual notice of violations out to the property owners or to the people that we made contact with the actual fines. The reason we can't actually submit the fine or present the fine, in person is we have admin costs built into that. And so to say $1,000 fine and write them and they expect it's $1,000 fine, well, there's additional admin costs and other fees that are tagged onto that, including our staff time, how long they're on a particular citation, that type of thing. Whether it's the engine company that goes out and actually does it, that could be a larger staff time. Because if it takes the whole engine company, that's $250 an hour. Getting that information back here, then sending the fines out is kind of what we've landed on with regards to the citation process. Tomorrow night, we will have a company called AeroWatch, who has been in communication with me already. And they will be up from 8 p.m. till midnight tomorrow night, flying 3 concentric patterns over Templeton during that 4-hour period and recording any illegal activity. So any launches, anything like that, I'll be in communication with them and they'll identify the areas, record it. They go back, do a data download, and they send us the data with a high, medium, and low confidence. So basically the general manager and I have talked, and probably the only ones we're gonna look at this year are the high confidence ones, to send them out. We'll take a look at the medium, but typically the low confidence ones, we don't wanna be in a situation like, City of Grover Beach or, somebody has had some issues, and I even think the county, with regards to losing their appeals, on these citations. So we want to make it high confidence. We don't want to have any losses, this first year, especially on illegal use. It is our intention, to do an education process with legal fireworks this year, unless somebody is blatantly, misusing them, altering them or something of that nature. Then a potential citation could be in order. Other than that, on the day of the 4th, we will be staffing, upstaffing our engines, and Captain Goldblum will be paired with a sheriff's detective in a plane car, and they will be driving the community with sheriff's drones, communicating to them the hotspots of where the illegal activity is. At that point, they'll make contact with the people in those illegal areas. And if they can identify, they'll have dash cams and cameras mounted, and to get video evidence. We'll get the information from those folks. Like I say, document it on our template that's on our iPads, bring that information back, and each one of them will be presented kind of like its own individual case, that will have evidence for the hearing officer to look at and make a determination should anybody challenge it. That's pretty much it. That's kind of what we're doing right now. We have gotten confirmation through the North County Sheriff's Commander that we will have some sheriff's resources in the community. And have, the drone for a period of time, probably not the whole evening. So just a period of time. And so it's much better than we've been dealing with the last several years.
We've also got confirmation that the county, and I believe actually they've already put them up, has placed signs up to state that there's no fireworks allowed at the park, even including safe and sane. It just says no fireworks permitted at the park. And then we've received donations from 3 of the permitted booth holders. And as well as a significant donation from TNT to help offset our costs. The cost of the aerial surveillance alone is $11,000 for the one night.
So you have a hotline where residents could call in to, now, if they have a video, if they take a video, can they like send you the video and use it for citation purposes? Or you know, Captain Goldblum and the sheriff, they have to directly see it?
They would have to really directly see it, because it's evidence that we'd actually have to take from their camera. Then it becomes circumstantial. Well, was that actually the person, you know, do they have an issue with their neighbor? I mean, a lot of things can come into play with regards to getting video evidence from somebody else's phone. That's not saying we can't do that. If it's a blatant thing and it's a clear photo and they're willing to provide us that, then yeah, the potential is there.
At least it could be an opportunity for education where will you consider going to that house and let them know, hey, we have this video, it shows you this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, I mean,
So
even if we
for
don't,
future.
right, even if we don't have video evidence where we're gonna actually cite somebody, if we're under the suspicion that that property has been launching illegal fireworks, we're gonna make contact with them.
Any other questions or comments from the public?
On Fox News, I noticed that they did have, they were talking about, that I guess the county has someday you could call in and I don't think you have rewards or something for any information.
Yeah, there's been a lot more coverage on the enforcement of illegal fireworks. I think that the county's program is focused on, if you know someone's selling or distributing illegal fireworks, there's a reward program to provide leads, to intercept that activity, to bust that activity.
I mean, on the national, Gutfeld show, so.
Yeah, they're not going to give you a reward for, you know, snitching on your neighbor for lighting them, but that type of stuff. And this is the root of our problem is how are so many of these getting into California, and then being distributed. From my understanding and the contacts I have through the prevention world, the majority of them are coming from Arizona and Mexico, but I'm sorry, some of them are coming from Arizona and Mexico. The majority of them are coming from Pahrump, Nevada.
You can't go up, did the Vegas, the Reno race this year, and you can't go 20 miles without, there's a firework.
Well,
Yeah, well, not booths, they're big warehouses.
Um,
There had been 30 of them going all the way up into, it's not,
And they sell illegal stuff and
Well,
No, it's totally
it's not illegal.
it's not at all, nothing is, oh wow.
No, it's totally legal for the aerial fireworks in Nevada. Yeah, it's just people are purchasing them there and bringing them back here. And, you know, my question is, how do you go into Nevada with a California address and driver's license and purchase?
it's like buying ammo. I mean, they just don't sell it, does it?
you know, I know last time I was in New Mexico, I mean, I walked into a place and they had like a whole wall of, fireworks. I mean, it's maybe a fifth of the price of what it costs over here.
Yeah.
So, it's cheap and, and when you drive into California, I don't think there's any check or anything for fireworks at all. Or, there's no checks at all. That just, It's like you slow down as you enter California and just all these booths and they're all empty. No one's, no one's watching, so.
Next agenda item is the fire engine update.
So, the fire engine is, we've gotten the last, set of plans. We've signed those approved set of plans have gone back and, construction is going to start this month. So we should be seeing the fire engine, in the latest update that we've received is, the end of September. So,
Fantastic.
so it's,
And a lot of the equipment is here, ready to go, that goes on it.
yeah, exactly. So we have purchased a significant amount of the equipment, the SCBA's and all of that type of stuff that go on the engine, and it's piling up over there. So we're getting there on that one.
Questions or comments from the public? Okay, next item is grant opportunities.
So the grant opportunities that we've seen this year, I went through the NOFO, I think NOFO, that's supposed to be NOFO, and notice the funding opportunity is when we looked at the SAFER grant to try and see if we could get the reserve program back or do something to increase that staffing shortage that we're in. Nothing really seemed to align, and therefore we didn't even seek the opportunity to put in for the SAFER grant this year. It would have, number one, it would have been unsuccessful in the model that we were considering because you have to hire full-time people. In the grant model, or sorry, in the reserve model that we were looking and have looked at in the past, it was not allowable in the notice of funding opportunity. It was just, nope, you can't do volunteers, you can't do reserves, you can't do anything except for full-time personnel. So with regards to the Assistance to Firefighters grant, we went after a few different items this time. The one being I keep wanting to call it Plymobile, but exhaust system in the apparatus bay of $60,000. The shed out back for the turnout, or sorry, the workout equipment, and then what we call a wellness prevention program, and that cancer prevention program is about $30,000. I have to give you the exact numbers, but what it does, it creates a baseline medical for all of our staff. And so none of them are caught off surprise like myself and don't have a baseline of what their existing numbers are moving forward. The reason my cancer was caught so quick is I had baseline numbers from City of Atascadero where we had annual physicals. This will provide a baseline number, and then the way the program works, it will potentially pay for a second year, but then I don't think it continues after that. And so what it does, sets that baseline number, gives all the fire personnel a good snapshot of where their current health is. And so I think there's a really good opportunity for that. And I think there's a really good opportunity for the shed to move the equipment out and get it out of the diesel exhaust. Again, like I say, I'm not real confident in the diesel exhaust single source system, but we'll see.
Questions or comments from the public? Okay. Next agenda item is advanced life support paramedic services.
So this item is basically brought before the committee to see if there's really any interest to move forward with pursuing this item. And kind of describes what the differences are between medics, and I think I presented this to the board before, or the committee before, the differences between paramedic and ALS services, I'm sorry, between ALS and BLS services. ALS services are paramedic services. They are quite a bit different than BLS services. We can do, in basic life support, we can do CPR, we can use an AED, we can use, and even in the advanced scope, we can use oxygen therapy, bleeding control, splinting, glucose monitoring. We can administer Narcan, epi for anaphylaxis. Our epi draws are something new in the last couple of years that the EMSA has allowed EMTs to do. Outside of that, everything for cardiac care and everything for diabetic emergencies, blood pressure, etc., that's all advanced life support stuff that we can't really react to on a BLS level. Without getting into too much detail, I would want to dive into this and go into more detail on how many ALS calls we go on every year, how many are BLS calls, what the response time of the ambulance was on those calls compared to our response time, on scene time, the ambulance on scene time, those types of things. We have had a lot of instances, primarily in the past couple of years, where we have been on scene for extended periods of time on ALS, significant ALS calls, waiting for an ambulance. And I mean up to 20, 25 minutes. So on those situations, I have had our captains email me with the details of the call, and then I forward those to our EMS agency, who then does a QI, QA evaluation on that call, that ambulance, what took place, why so long, that type of stuff. It then, does that go to APOC? Yeah. And then it goes to our ambulance performance operations committee. They look at it and make determinations based on their performance, the ambulance company's performance. So I'd want to get all those details and that information and provide real numbers. But again, like I say, this is a snapshot of the difference between ALS and BLS, in my opinion, is significant. We've gone on enough calls and had enough shortages of ambulances where we've been waiting that I want to investigate this. And I think it's a worthwhile investigation. But if there's no interest by this committee or the board or the community, I'd really rather not spend time on it. And so I personally, living in the community and somebody who's about to retire, I would love for our personnel to be ALS. Because I've seen what's happened over the last year and a half with regards to response times from the ambulance company, and they have gotten significantly worse. Now, with regards to funding considerations, there's a lot of things that we can do with regards to funding considerations. Some of them are as simple as, well, I say it's simple, but going out and just saying, hey folks, with Templeton on a paramedic program, it would cost X amount of dollars. For example, $10 a month additionally onto Measure A, whether we call this Measure P, whatever it is, go out to the voters and say, is this something you're interested in? That would be enough to raise enough money to then come back and not only provide us with medics, but provide us with enough money to bring our reserve program back. So it's kind of a double benefit. where we get the 3-person engine company back, plus we have paramedics on every engine. There's a few ways to accomplish this. I've put those in the implementation options. There's a couple of, like I say, different ways to go about it, depending upon what the flavor of the community board, the committee is, to implement. I don't think I need to go into big detail what the advantages of ALS is with the committee. There's obvious advantages. Advanced life support does significantly better your odds for survival on a critical medical event. So cardiac arrest, diabetic emergency, blood pressure, a variety of things. So it's one of those situations where, like I said, I think it's worth investigating. The other aspect is as we are looking at a new ambulance contract with regards to funding, there might be opportunities within that ambulance contract to see if there's enough funding where if we go from BLS to ALS, the increased payback to the district, I don't know what that looks like yet, might offset a good majority of that. We just don't know. Because ALS departments get a significantly lesser cut of our first responder fees than ALS departments do. And so if we looked at going ALS, we were able to do that, then we could potentially get a larger piece of that first responder fee pie, as it were. Let's see. I think that's pretty much captured the essence of it, without going into significant detail. The majority of it is in the report. Like I said, it does bring back that enhanced third-person staffing. If we were able to go down that route and get enough money for the medic program itself, or paramedic program itself, has inherent costs, training, base station training and CEs for the medics, the equipment. There's a lot of expiration dates with regards to medications that are carried. And so you're constantly cycling through those. There's a cost with that. And all of that would need to be factored in, along with, again, all of the response data to see whether or not, there's a significant enough impact ALS wise to benefit the community, which I believe there is. But again, I would have more of those numbers for you right now, but our current image trend has been down for about almost 3 months. And that's why you haven't been seeing the activity reports with the breakdown of our calls. And so hopefully we just brought on contract an IT gentleman that's going to help us navigate through that. But image trend has to do some updates because it's affecting everybody, not just us. In a report, any questions?
A question, couple of questions. Is any other fire department jurisdiction in our county at least only BLS, or are they all ALS?
No, there's so 5 cities is BLS. And then the volunteer departments are BLS. Cambria is ALS.
So the 5 cities is only
5 cities is the
San
actual.
Miguel, Santa Margarita,
And again, those are volunteer
Santa
departments, so they're not gonna be,
yeah.
they're not gonna be ALS.
and then county.
County has a lot of stations that are not ALS, they're BLS. But they do have their busier stations that are starting to go ALS.
And then, as far as the staffing model you mentioned, so you're mentioning, reserve, bringing the reserve program back. And I know we discussed this a few months ago, we discussed the benefits and risk of having, advantages, disadvantages, having reserve program versus having full-time hired, full-time people.
Mhm.
So why are you recommending reserve program instead of, hiring full-time?
Well, I'm just not sure that the community would be able to stomach the type of increase that it would take to bring full-time firefighters on. I mean, we could go down that route, but I would want to collect these numbers first to identify whether it's legitimate. And then if we want to do that, yeah, we could definitely look at taking that whole bite of the apple and kind of not make the same mistake we've made with
Yes.
Measure A.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. I don't wanna, I feel like we made a mistake with Measure A where we just came out right away and said $15 a month and we kind of were stuck with that. Like before we go out and start saying $10 a month, I'd
Oh,
like
this is,
to,
yeah.
yeah, I'd like to look at that and see what it would entail, because I would feel like that in 5 years or 6 years or 10 years down the road, we're saying, oh, we're gonna go back here. This doesn't really work having a, reserve program. We need a full-time firefighters that are here. So for, obviously experience and training and things like that. So, I mean, I would like to look at those numbers too, if we decide as, committee or board going down that path, just to see what those numbers look like. Because I feel like reserve program will end up being like a temporary fix, and then we're gonna be back into a situation where, okay, we wish we had asked for more money.
Agreed.
Well, and just wanna make sure that it's clear that I think that model doesn't expect the reservists to be the paramedics.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah,
so
but still.
it's a big step, right? There's no doubt that it's a significant enhancement in services that we could provide as if we provided a paramedic level service, but there's a new cost. And without a new funding source, that is probably not conceivable.
Yes.
And while there might be some other reimbursements or other, actually, the county's gonna go through a process and potentially we'll have a different ambulance service model or different ambulance provider, we don't know yet, with a new structure. That we'll know more within the year maybe on that topic. I think that's summer. That there might be some other, there might be some small pieces that can feed into this, help offset some of those costs, but I think it'd be naive to think that would fully cover the cost of us going from what we provide now to paramedics. And when this committee discussed this a couple of years ago, before the makeup of the committee was different. And, actually we had some interest from committee members of the public who were on the committee with certainty about it. Why can we move forward with this? And at the time, I kind of felt like, that's really sort of 2 steps ahead. We need to get to a spot where we can have security and just staffing what we have, and then look to enhance it. And is it even conceivable to add a paramedic level service when right now we have a deficit program with 2 staff, 2 persons on the engine? So you could run a paramedic program with 2 people, but is that reliable enough? You're committing to have a paramedic on duty all the time. It takes, so you're gonna we have a workforce of 6 people who serve on the engine.
So that would mean if we wanna do that, then we'll have to hire 3 people, right, for the paramedic, if we wanna do full-time?
Well,
At least
we would train 3 people.
Oh, 3 of the existing.
That would be my recommendation, is we make our engineers medics and even potentially
But then
one
how
of our
would-
captains.
But that would mean that we bring back the reserve program.
It could.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, I don't
Yeah.
wanna, I put these numbers in there as placeholders. That could go one way or another. These are all just, options to think about, and kind of give you an idea of what it could potentially be. I could put a far more detailed report together, with numbers, responses, ALS, BLS, all of that type of stuff. If the committee and board want me to look at full-time firefighters, yeah, we could sit down and look at that too, to see what that cost would be. But then this kind of goes into our station. So it's kind of a compounding effect of, right, now we've got 3 full-time people, we've gotta have a spot to put them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're trying to piecemeal a lot of things together, right? Like, can we keep what we have afloat by doing some less than ideal station modifications for the 2-person staffing? And then maybe in a pinch, you could squeeze a 3rd person in, but you don't have 3 bathrooms. We're back to introducing some inadequacy at the station. If you're thinking that we're gonna have a 3-person paramedic service, then we've got to be back on that station expansion to really accommodate that 3rd person here all the time. So I think there's some complexities that need to be sort of thought through. I guess my thinking is, it's obvious that going to paramedic service is a significant enhancement. If you default to saying, well, that really means we need to have 3 persons on the engine to fairly accommodate that, and to provide a commitment of that type of service, having 4 or 5 paramedics employed by the district to ensure we always have 1 on duty. Those are significant new costs. And if there's not a willingness to obtain significant new resources, then this is just an exercise. And is it worth our time if there's not an appetite to pursue those additional funding sources? We might know more information, but if there's not a willingness to pursue significant new operating resources, then I think it's maybe kind of just an exercise. These folks have both worked in agencies that provided advanced life support.
I mean, from my side, I think the feasibility study is primary, to see if there's an appetite from the community to raise funds for this. If there's no appetite, then there's no route really to go down. On the other hand, if this is something that the community wants to invest in, and they understand what the costing is for it, then including ongoing.
But again, I think you're absolutely right. What I want to do is if there is an appetite from the board or the committee and then the board, to then see if there's an appetite from the community. I want to be able to provide real numbers.
Yeah, I think that's the one part that's really missing right here is that, we gotta look at the number of EMS calls you have, which ones are BLS, which ones are ALS, which ones are high acuity ALS, what your wait times are.
Yep.
As far as, because there's a service level agreement with the county, with the ambulances, it's a system. So even though we have an ambulance station here, that ambulance doesn't have to reside here. It can go anywhere in the county based on the need of emergencies. We also have a base hospital here, which we tend to have more hospitals in our community, more ambulances in our community, like we did in the city of San Luis Obispo. We had very short wait times because we're gonna get the closest ambulance. We can get a Cameron's ambulance because they can be dropping a patient off and be available. So I think that it's really kind of data driven. And I see it as 2 things when you talk about the reserves. And then, one part is it's getting the data and ALS so that you can, inform the board, like, hey, here's the information. Ultimately, it's a higher level of service. And we always want the best level of service. And not to begin with, just understand, I believe I was a paramedic for 33 years. I'm all in on that part. But I think the costing of it, in order to be able to bring it back to the board and the board to bite off and say, yes, we want to go out to the community and find out the threshold. It's easier to say, hey, this is what the wait times are. This is the number of calls. This is what the benefits are. And then that way it's an informed decision. I think the other part is, because I talked with Tom earlier, the reserve part kind of threw me off. It's like, well, hang on a second, you're talking about ALS. How'd you get the reserves in here? Is there a benefit, if adding on to, hey, here's what the total cost of an ALS program is. But if we added whatever, throw a number out and another $10, this gets us,
Full-time firefighters.
full-time firefighter or whatever the And whatever that menu is, and I think that way it better informs you to make that decision of, yes, yeah, we really want ALS service, or, you know, maybe we just want firefighters, you know, additional firefighters for the time being, with a goal of, you know, looking to see what the ambulance, the new contract, if that GMAT's available, as far as what kind of funding might be able to now afford you to have that program, so.
And again, there's, you know, as,
And real quick, and there's a big obstacle with the county EMSA to get an
absolutely,
ALS program,
yeah,
so.
you have
Just
to
because we
go-
want to do it doesn't mean we can do it. And Paso could, you know, Paso took them 7 or 8 years to get their paramedic program because they weren't original paramedic provider.
Yeah.
So,
We'd have to show a need, we'd have to show our ability. And I've already discussed this with, the previous EMSA director and even Ryan, the current one. And it's possible. I don't think it would take 7 years anymore,
no,
but,
not with the EMSA director.
no. You know, if we came up with a plan, we could probably get there pretty quick, you know, within a couple of years. But that's all of our training and everything else. But again, I want to draw back to the fact that I want to provide real numbers. I want to provide real data to show the board, that, hey, this is how many times we've been waiting on an ambulance. And it could have affected the outcome of this citizen in our community. Now, we go on a lot of calls that are lift assists and those types of things. We got to draw those out and eliminate those. You know, last year, 1,230 calls. How many of those were lift assists and those types of things, and break it down to where I can provide the actual numbers of, okay, here were all of our ALS calls. Let's say it was 700 of them that were ALS, or I'm sorry, EMS calls. Within that 700, let's say 500 were ALS or 400. And then go into the acuity of, okay, were they ALS because they started an IV just for precautionary reasons, or was it an actual ALS call where they were like, yep, this is, and we.
High acuity. High
What
acuity
did I say?
ALS. But no, the ALS is ALS, but then high acuity would be O3 transport,
Yes.
intubations,
Yeah.
defibrillations, medications.
So that high acuity call is the ones that we want to identify and say, okay, how many of those we had in the community? And how many times would we, as paramedics in the engine, be going out and actually affecting somebody's outcome? And I think those are important numbers. Bring to the board.
Do you think that those, the arrival times by the, contracted services, the ambulance provider, is that something that's pretty static? Or if they went out with an RFP soon and then there was a different provider that would change one way or another, or are they pretty static, you think, regardless of who is in place, San Luis or some other?
Yeah, so the current ambulance company, the only problem we're having is information sharing. And a lot of times, and particularly APOC is saying, when they come to APOC and they ask for new rates, for example, they just asked for a rate increase. And it went from $3,200 to something $100, $5,400. That's a significant increase. Well, they have to justify why this is happening. And APOC really doesn't have all of the information, but they're kind of mandated to make these decisions based on the information they do have. Otherwise, they're completely out of compliance. And now we're in trouble in the EMS world of our county with the state. And so essentially, they have to go ahead and approve that and say, okay, we got to take your word for it. You know, you're not meeting these standards. This rate increase will allow you to meet these standards. But if a new ambulance company comes on board, they can reduce those rates and they can increase their response times and the number of ambulances that they're putting into the field, that's the biggest benefit that we're looking at. Currently, our current ambulance contractor doesn't put what are called BLS ambulances into the field to do basic interfacility transfers. So from Vineyard Hills to Twin Cities, or from Twin Cities to Sierra Vista. These are not ALS, they're basic life support transfers. They're just, I mean, I don't mean to sound condescending, but they're basically a taxi ride in an ambulance from one facility to another because they need to get over there to have a different level of care. Our current ambulance contractor is not doing that. They're not putting those BLS ambulances in play. Therefore, they're taking an ALS ambulance out of service every time they do those. And how many IFTs do they do in a, they do quite a few in a day. So it takes an ALS ambulance out of service several times a day within the 911 system. And that creates a drawdown. And so when we write our contracts, or the county writes their contracts, then it's a situation where they have to fulfill that, but they're not fulfilling that, and they wind up taking the penalties as opposed to putting another ambulance in the mix, which was, let's say it's $1 million a year to put another ambulance into the system. Well, let's say their fines are $300,000 for the year. Well, that's a saving of $700,000 for them. So I'm not saying that's what the numbers are. I'm just saying that's a representation of what could be happening. And so if a new company comes in, they would be tied to a new private-public partnership where the public entity, which would be Paso Robles at this point, would then have control over that and say, no, you are going to put 2 new ambulances into the system today. You know, and then have to be compensated appropriately. So yeah, there are differences, and that could change the response times and metrics with regards to how often and how long we wait. I hope that wasn't too messy.
Just to sort of circle back to, I think, the issue at hand is, so we can continue to do work on this, research on this. It is, you know, clearly, it would be an enhancement of services, but unless there's an appetite at the end of the day to seek more revenue, it's just gonna be interesting information. We're not in a position to offer paramedic service through the funding that we have available today. So unless the committee and then ultimately the board is willing to, at some point, move forward or wishes to consider at some point moving forward and seeking some sort of revenue enhancement, it's just, it would just be interesting information. And I don't want to try to talk you out of that. I just.
Well, but I think it goes back though, without the data, you know, it would be, you know, is it a wish or is it a fact? I'd rather have the facts to go, yeah, it seems like this is probably worthwhile looking deeper into it before you make a decision that you want to go to the public with.
Sure.
Versus if we go, well, yes, it's occurring, but it's occurring every 150 times where there's a bit of a wait time. And then based on the acuity, you know, and we don't want anybody to ever suffer or anybody to lose their life, but if it's once every year or once every 2 or 3 years where there's just an absolute miss, there's an absolute miss all throughout the county. It's happening, not for any specific reason, but I think that would be, it would help you have an informed, help us have an informed decision before you make that first step. But I think you're right, you know, that what's the community's appetite? Well, if we're not able to inform the board accurately, how can we inform the community?
Again, it's, you know, I'm willing to do the work. It's a lot of staff time. I just don't want to do it in vain.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, I do have a concern with going back to reserve program. I mean, I really don't, at this point, I really don't wanna, we discussed that and there were issues and it didn't work and we had multiple conversations about having reserve programs, so if we do it, I would like to have the full-time, firefighters or paramedics, but
So
that,
take
that
the
would-
full bite out of the apple.
yes, but that would then be a significant cost. So then, I don't know, so that's is a dilemma.
Again, I don't know what that cost
yeah.
is,
So, yeah, that's the thing.
but it would have to be, yeah, definitely more than the $10.
Yes, it would be definitely more than 10, and I know we just had a bond, that was school bond that passed, and people were complaining about that, and that barely passed, so. I don't, I know obviously this is ALS, so it's, it's different, it's safety, so maybe there'd be more
I know-
appetite with it for people. But it's hard
Well,
to say.
I know, for example, in my neighborhood, everybody I talk to, and over the last few months, I've been going on a lot of walks to try and regain my, mobility after a couple surgeries there, and everybody I've talked to is like 100%. And so I haven't not had a naysayer with regards to, going down that route. But I don't know what the other neighborhoods, that's a small sampling of the community.
I mean, I like the whole idea of ALS, I mean, I think it's important if we can do it, have a higher level service, that would be nice. But as you mentioned, I think we need some data before, even discussing it further, so. I don't wanna have you spend too much time, but I think we do need some more information, at least as far as I'm concerned, to see if that would be something that, would work, in Templeton, or is needed in Templeton.
Yeah. And depending upon how well our new contract IT guy, works, and it may not be as, time consuming,
Okay,
but I just have to see.
okay. Oh, I'm open.
Okay, well, our next step on this, and we'll report back some sort of historical data and try to break down those calls, so you can then have some data to understand instead of just sort of anecdotal observations.
Yeah, and then would that include like the difference between doing reserve program?
I think that's a whole separate,
That's
that's a whole separate
I
thing.
think it is, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's,
that's fine.
yeah.
We could keep.
I mean, we could incorporate, the numbers together to say, okay, going ALS plus bringing on 3 new firefighters, we could, combine those numbers and say, okay, well, this is what it's gonna cost for both.
I mean, if it's possible.
I think, but I guess, I think it sounds like, I mean, I was thinking it was sort of a more two-step process, like, okay,
Okay.
you wanted the data, or at least, Mr. Agson referred to as, studying the data to see if it's even worth going to the next step.
Okay,
Is this happening in a way that we can articulate, that we can explain and articulate and say, okay, look, we're gonna make a difference on 10% of the calls we're going to? Or
Yeah.
whatever, that'd be 100 a year, or 120 a year, if you're making a difference on potentially making a difference in outcomes several times a week, that seems like something you could articulate as opposed to a handful of times a year, or whatever that is. But however we break this down,
that's fine.
then what is it that,
Okay.
what would it take to solve it? Then what does that mean? And,
That's fine. We could do that one.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
And I don't know if the board would be up for it, like, I would even recommend just taking 2025 numbers, because you have all your image trend. Getting the ambulance data, comparing it to the ECC data, that would probably be the easiest way to do it with the least amount of your time. Because you'll be able to call code, you can pull those up, you'll be able to pull them up, and you'll be able to cross-reference, and especially with the ECC, because you're dispatched through the county. That they can give you all that information, your time on call, time on scene, time en route, time on, response time, time at, calling, how long, what was your commitment time overall?
Yep.
I think that would help you more expediently be able to paint a picture to go, hey, this way, and then from the ambulance, have them provide
Therein-
ALS.
Therein lies the problem, is getting that data. I tried to get it for our.
Part of the
master-
ambulance
our master
performance
plan.
operations committee is that is in that service level agreement that they have to provide that. In order for them to get the increase they just got, they had to provide that documentation. So it's somewhere, it's alive somewhere. Because the board of supervisors is what approves the increase, and they would have had to have that to show, hey, this, because they put on an ambulance at Los Osos they didn't formally have, and they added a day car. So
Yeah.
that was their justification on top of, hey, we're meeting our performance. And I think we're suburban, this is suburban, not urban, it would be suburban.
We're,
We are urban.
yeah, we're,
Okay,
yeah, I've had to do that for the
so then it's
FEMA grants.
8 minutes over 10 minutes.
Yeah.
All right.
Comments, questions from the public? Final agenda item is future items.
One thing, and I don't know how the committee feels about, I was thinking, about possibility of, because, the possibility of looking at nursing homes and the number of times we go there.
I had that on mine.
So, well, and this is one of the things that I've discussed with him, and this is one of the items. I put together a report probably 15 years ago for the city of Tascadero on that very item. And actually, the city of Paso Robles, I don't know if they used my information, but at the time, the city of Tascadero didn't want to do it. City of Paso Robles adopted it, and they've reduced their calls. Well, I don't know if they reduced their calls, but they're getting compensated for their
Yeah.
calls.
And I hear like $400 or something an hour.
Well, it's an
About
engine,
80,000 a year. is what I
yeah, it's
think
an engine company per hour cost.
Yeah.
And it's only 2 facilities. In San Luis, we had 2
Yeah.
facilities. It's 1919 Creston and then up on
But-
River Road there.
Well, they added a third one now over on Union, so
Oh.
Heavenly Home.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
The LA County fire guy.
yeah,
I did all the
Yeah.
plans for that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
so they've got 3 that they incorporated into it, so I think their numbers have gone up. But, I did something similar to what Keith did, in, I think, Paso, or, I don't know. You mentioned.
San Luis, we
The
have
whole-
two
the-
facilities, and if they have an RN, you can do ambulance only. And
Yeah,
so
but
ambulance
not
only
the
gives you,
toothless threat that you were talking about.
oh, no, I know, but what I was gonna say, ambulance only though builds capacity. So the number of times that you go to Vineyard or any of the
Yeah,
facilities that have an RN, they can do ambulance only, there's no fire response. So it was about 700 runs a year for us in the city. So it was a significant amount where it would be the ambulance only. If the ambulance got there and the acuity of the call required, we virtually both facilities are side by side. We have a fire station right around the corner. They could walk over to it. So, but
And-
it
and
really, there's one savings there.
yeah, and we've done that, I wanna say at least 15 times this year. Where, the ambulance has gotten on scene at Vineyard Hills and went, where's fire?
So you wanna have it sounds like, you're discussing this item, so I wanna make sure I capture it right. Was there some sort of analysis about calls to these facilities?
and no,
There's a county policy. So
Yeah,
there-
to
there's,
charge it, basically,
Yeah.
after a certain.
no, that's a steep hill to climb. There's a county
Plus
policy.
Paso Robles, that-
Well, that's when it's originally built, though. It's built into when you get your permit.
Yeah.
It's in your permit that you are agreeing.
To come back and retroactively do it
Very,
is,
very
is,
difficult.
is difficult, and that's why City of Tascadero didn't do it.
Yeah, San Luis was not able to do it. They're doing it on Pink Farm and Broad, on the facility they're building there, that will have it.
Well,
But
there's
it's
a
only
new
because it's
facility
new.
that could go in possibly, in Templeton.
Correct, the one on Vineyard.
No, I think they bought, they say it was gonna be assisted living, behind the Legion Hall, by the railroad station. They're gonna build.
Let's pull together some information about some of these policies.
So what I would ask though, I would not ask about parking, right? That ain't so lost. You're not gonna get your money. You're gonna spend more staff money.
Yeah.
Going, the 80,000 Paso's losing money every time they go. So they're not breaking even on that. What I would say is, at least on Vineyard Hills and any other facility that has 24-hour RN service, not assisted living, but RN service is to just use the county's policy of ambulance only, because it would it potentially had 200 runs there. I think that's what you said earlier. Then that would give you 200 less runs on your engine, your staff, and they're more available for a more high acuity call. And that way, it's just an ambulance. Typically, a doctor is, the RN's called a doctor and said, such and such has got a urinary tract infection. They need to go across the street to Twin. Well, instead of rolling a 40,000-pound engine over there to stand by and help them transfer, the ambulance just handles it.
Okay.
And they're for profit, they get paid.
Okay. All right, we could look at policies, whatever.
But I mean, we can do more than one. I'm saying that's what I'd like to see us pursue and see if it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was hoping we could, like, after 20 or 30 times a year, we could start charging.
Well, I mean, I can go back and look into the report that I wrote. But I know, for example, that was one of the issues with the city of Atascadero when the city attorney looked at it was it'd be a steep climb to try and retroactively go back and start charging them. And you'd have to build it into their permit.
Now, if they go from assisted living to convalescent, then you would be able to do it.
So should we have a policy in place that we?
Yeah, I mean, you could easily do that, but the way it's looked at is that their facility is already paying taxes.
Yeah.
And so, how can you double tax them basically?
I see.
But if it's an initial, hey, this is, in 1919, Preston was
So,
abundance, but they said, well, hey, we'd rather just pay it because it's cheaper to pay to have the fire guys come out and lift up our patient and this and that than to have to pay the proper staffing.
well, and yeah,
So I've noted that call, the potentially that we'll have some data breakdown on
Options.
the ALS, BLS service issues. And is there any other requests for future items?
Oh, you got the nursing?
Nursing home, yeah.
Maybe there'll be a confirmation or decision by the county, some direction about this expansion in those.
Yeah, we'll keep you
I
updated
would
on
hope
those.
so, yeah.
Adjourned at 4:25.